The Capital Confidential podcast is brought to you by the Times-Union, the leading newspaper in New York's capital region. Subscribe today or visit online at timesunion.com.
Cynthia Nixon's last best chance to wrest the Democratic nomination from Governor Andrew Cuomo could be the same opportunity that helped catapult his father into the post 36 years ago. I'll let former AP Capitol reporter Marc Humbert explain.
Yeah, it's fascinating, the current situation with Cynthia Nixon and Andrew Cuomo, because when it comes to gubernatorial debates, his father's gubernatorial career was really made by debates. Back in '82, Ed Koch was mayor of New York City and was so considered the front runner that everybody else bailed out of the race on the Democratic side except Mario Cuomo. And he stayed in. Stanley Fink got out. Several others got out. Mario stayed in. And in those debates, Mario really held his own and also showed a real knowledge of state government, which, of course, Ed Koch had great bluster and knew a lot about New York City politics. But he had denigrated Albany in an interview with Playboy magazine and denigrated upstate New York, that sort of thing. And Cuomo did a masterful job in the debates of playing on that kind of thing. He really created an impression that he was for real and that he was a guy who could take Koch on.
The roadmap to a similar upset is littered with more obstacles for Nixon, who just gets one primary debate, has less time to build momentum, and is squaring off against a more battle-tested debater. This week's episode of the Capital Confidential podcast is a deep dive into the lone primary debate between Nixon and Cuomo, who will share the stage in front of 150 people for a commercial-free hour broadcast on local CBS affiliates in less than 2 weeks.
You want to deport an undocumented person? Start with me, because I'm an undocumented person.
How do we beat him in an election? We will. I'm going to run against him. I wish you would. I wish you would, Dad. I would.
There are things in here that are unobjectionable because they're not that effective. So yeah, sure, I'll vote for a distinctive license plate. Sure, why not?
Jim, you had your press conference at 4 o'clock.
You're having a press conference now?
That's
You're
right.
talking?
I'm having a press conference.
Well,
now.
is this your space here or is it public?
No, it's my space.
Oh, this is your
Don't
space.
interrupt.
Okay.
I'm David Lombardo, and you're listening to the Capital Confidential podcast. The agreement on the scheduled one-on-one matchup comes more than 3 months after Nixon first challenged the governor to a televised debate. Cuomo, who avoided a debate in 2014 against his Democratic primary challenger, was non-committal for most of the summer about debating Nixon, saying only that there will be a debate. He has avoided one-on-one debates since 2006 and has preferred to have the stage littered with as many third-party candidates as possible, a move his father would certainly be proud of.
Subsequent to '82, you had to drag Mario kicking and screaming to get him into a debate, and when he would go into a debate, he would usually arrange it so every minor party candidate that had ever been heard of was invited to the debate, and otherwise Mario Cuomo, the incumbent, wouldn't show up.
From a political perspective, former George Pataki advisor Bob Bellafiore said it's understandable if Cuomo doesn't want to debate Nixon at all.
Well, in almost all cases with a debate like this, the challenger or the person who is far behind has the most to gain, and the person with the lead, which is usually the incumbent, has the most to lose. The best way to tell that, Dave, is to look at who's been pushing for the debate and who's been delaying on agreeing to the debate. There's very little ground to gain if you're like Governor Cuomo in this case, with a healthy double-digit lead in the polls. So the challengers always have a way to make inroads. They always have a way to try to make their case to a large number of people they wouldn't be able to make before, and if they are particularly skilled at this sort of thing, sometimes they can prod their opponent into some kind of gaffe or a mistake or a statement that their opponent would regret saying, which can help to undermine the leader and give the challenger an opening that didn't exist before the debate. So to summarize, the person ahead always has the most to lose and has very little to gain from a debate politically. And the underdog always has the most to gain.
That's not to say there aren't stakes for Cuomo, though, who has long been rumored to harbor presidential ambitions.
A lot of the people who are going to be paying attention to this are national Democrats, because they want to see how he performs against somebody who has done improv and line delivering her whole life. She knows how to deliver a line in an unscripted moment. You know, this is not Jimmy McMillan and Carl Palladino anymore. This is somebody who knows how to deliver a line, has stage presence, and knows how to make it work. The people watching this, the people who are going to be looking for signals, is he presidential? Can he handle a circumstance like this? Because on a national campaign, there are tons of debates. He has a lot riding on this, much more than she does.
In advance of the debates, Nixon's campaign said they're gearing up for their shot at Cuomo. A senior advisor on the campaign wouldn't say who the Cuomo fill-in would be for debate prep, but noted that many members were relishing the opportunity to play the role. In 2002, with Pataki gearing up for his third election campaign, Bellafiore said they tried to give him all the information he needed to answer any questions or scenarios that might come up.
It was really a practicing Q&A. You know, what are the key messages that you want to make sure you get out? This will be what any candidate does before any semi-controlled interaction like this, which is there's going to be a handful of issues that are going to be raised in the amount of time that you have. What is it that you want to say? And no matter what the question is, what's your answer going to be? You know, Henry Kissinger once said, I hope you have questions for my answers. And that's how you go into these debates, which is, I don't care what the question is, you know, that's going to be the answer. If you're asking a question about the MTA, I'm going to talk about what we've done to improve the infrastructure. And I'm going to talk about all the things I've done for the MTA, but I'm going to get into a larger piece about investing in our roads and bridges. And, you know, the subways are important, and that's why it requires a partnership with New York City. And New York City hasn't done enough to take care of the suburbs and Westchester and even its own people riding the subways. You know, he's going to give answers that are directly targeted towards the demographic who isn't only watching the debate, but is going to vote in the primary.
Democratic consultant Bruce Gyory had this advice for the candidates when they actually get to the big stage.
If you were Andrew Cuomo, since your opponent has spent an awful lot of time telling people you're a bully, probably makes a lot of sense to have a lot of sugar cookies the afternoon of the debate so that you're in a very good frame of mind. If you're Cynthia Nixon, because your opponent and your opponent's campaign has questioned whether you have the experience and working knowledge of government to be an effective chief executive, you would not want to have a factual mistake either of the serious nature, like when you say there are for-profit prisons in New York when there are none, or like what I'll call a trivial mistake. You know, you mispronounce someplace upstate.
The Nixon campaign has said they're going to expose Cuomo as a, quote, corporate Democrat, which is a message Bellafiore thinks could play well in a Democratic primary.
You know, she clearly needs to show that for all that the governor has done on the progressive side of the ledger, which is a lot. She still has to show, I think, that he doesn't really mean it, that he's not really, you know, one of, quote unquote, us, that he's just doing this for politics and his heart's not in it.
While millions of people might have tuned in to see Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump square off 3 times, Bruce Gyory anticipates only the most ardent political junkies and devoted primary voters will catch the debate live.
In a debate like this, most people learn about the debate from the coverage that comes after. In other words, not like no one watches the debate, that's a gross exaggeration, but more people read about the debate and watch snippets on the news than actually watch the entire debate.
Because the debate gets filtered through the media, the expectations that journalists could have might affect the coverage.
In 2009, the perception was Mike Bloomberg was way ahead and was going to just completely wipe the floor with Bill Thompson. That first debate, most everybody thought Thompson beat him, and anybody who watched the debate thought he was. Bloomberg was a little flat. Thompson was, if not on fire, at least very articulate and took the message to him, scored a lot of points. Bloomberg seemed flustered, and it wasn't like he was was, drooling out of his mouth. But he seemed flustered and a little angry. Everybody thought he won, but the New York Times coverage the next day said he needed a knockout because Bloomberg is so far ahead, and while he did better than the mayor, it was not a knockout. So it was deflating to Thompson, and it turned out, well, the race was close enough. He probably didn't need a knockout, but that coverage affected it.
Here is former reporter Marc Humbert again, explaining what he was listening for during debates.
Of course, you're looking for policy differences, but you're also looking for gaffes. You're looking for great one-liners. I mean, let's face it. Back then, today, it's the same thing. Everybody's looking for a good hook for a news story. You want to get the reader engaged. And so you're looking for that great hook to get your story going. Of course, Mario Cuomo and Ed Koch were great with one-liners, and they would fire zingers back and forth at each other. So it made for great TV. Everybody got really great clips and got great quotes.
Once the candidates get on the stage, one aspect that is out of their control is the performance of the moderators. This debate will include political correspondent Marcia Kramer, who actually hosted a 2002 debate between Andrew Cuomo and then-Comptroller Carl McCall for the Democratic gubernatorial nomination. I caught snippets of this footage earlier in the week, and she was really pushing back on all the non-answer answers. Here is Bob Bellafiore again.
There's a big responsibility here, by the way, and maybe the biggest responsibility belongs to the questioner, right? Especially in a situation like this, because they know how well practiced that the two candidates are, and they know what the candidates are trying to do, and they know what the candidates want to talk about and don't want to talk about. So it's really up to the questioners to decide if they're going to let candidates get away with talking points and spin, or if they're going to really hold their feet to the fire and follow up with more direct questioning that forces the two candidates to get out of their, practiced answer. And not all moderators are good at doing that. Marcia Kramer's never been afraid of anybody.
Ultimately, all three of my guests agreed it would take something extremely memorable for Nixon to definitively win the debate, and it would require Cuomo to make a great misstep. See what I did there? For the most part, though, the kind of moments that swing an election or influence it in a meaningful way are few and far between, although Marc Humbert has covered a few, including Mario Cuomo's general election debate against Republican Louis Lerman.
Lerman looked up and he looked at his watch pointedly and looked over at Mario. And Mario turned to Lerman and said, "Nice watch, Lou. Looks expensive." And of course, driving home the point that Lerman is this really rich guy. It was classic Mario, though. He was very good on his feet like that.
And in the 2000 Senate race in New York?
Hillary Clinton's debate against Rick Lazio when he suddenly crossed the stage and tried to confront her at her podium, and she sort of backed off like he was going to hit her or something. And it was like, oh my God, Rick, you just came across as a bully.
Even if there was a gaffe that captured the media's attention, Bellafiore questioned whether there was enough time between the debate and the election for it to really sink in.
The governor's people have played this very well to their own advantage, because even if the governor were to make, a significant gaffe that could imperil or undermine his rationale for a third term, Cynthia Nixon would only have 2 weeks to use it, and it may not be enough to make any kind of significant gain.
So that's your cold-hearted look at the upcoming debate between Cynthia Nixon and Andrew Cuomo. My takeaway from listening to the experts, at least from a political standpoint, is that the debates won't matter much. The governor's consistent lead in the polls, his ability to blanket the airwaves with ads, and his institutional support make a game-changing debate seem like a remote possibility. But I'll be watching. My thanks to all the guests on this episode, including Bruce Gyory, Marc Humbert, and Bob Bellafiore. All three will appear in my upcoming debate analysis for the print edition of the Times-Union. If you enjoyed the show from an Apple device, please leave us a review. As always, you can connect with the show on social media at TUCapcon, and all our work, including the podcast, is shared on the Capital Confidential podcast. And while I ended on a cynical note about the upcoming debate, I'll let Bob Bellafiore send you home with an inspiring message about debates. Until next time, podcast adjourned.
I do like debates because while much of the time they are rote and sometimes policy oriented, which doesn't make great TV, a candidate still has to perform and speak in a semi-controlled environment and think on their feet, and that tells you a lot about a candidate's makeup and ability to campaign and govern. So I do think they are important.
Yes.
Okay.
Go ahead. Yeah, sorry. I'm chomping at the bit, and I should just be relaxed. You asked the questions.